3:18 in the morning, November 12, 1943. South of Fastiv, Kyiv Oblast, Ukraine. Rain had been falling for 9 straight days. In the dark, an M4A2 Sherman lay tilted in a sea of mud, its left track buried so deeply that the sprocket teeth could no longer bite metal. German flares burst overhead, white light freezing the field into sharp shadows. Panzergrenadier mortars were already walking closer, thump, thump, each impact nearer than the last. The driver was screaming that the engine would not move them. The commander was shouting that a Panzer IV had just been seen near the tree line. And beneath the hull, soaked in freezing mud, one mechanic counted under his breath. Not minutes. Seconds. He had 1 minute to make a dead track move, or the Sherman would become a stationary coffin. 60 seconds. How did it come to this? The 1st Guards tank army had crossed the Dnieper weeks earlier, driving west through Ukraine in pursuit of a broken German front. But victory did not move on dry roads. It moved through mud. Rasputitsa had returned. The autumn thaw had turned fields into oceans of black clay. Villages disappeared into fog and rain. Roads were no longer roads, only narrow ridges of firmer earth between bottomless ruts. Trucks sank to their axles. Horses drowned in mud. Tanks moved like wounded animals, slow and vulnerable. On November 12, the 6th Guards Tank Brigade was ordered to push south of Fastiv, clearing a corridor toward Bila Tserkva. The Germans were falling back, but not in panic. They were retreating by doctrine, leaving rearguards, minefields, and hidden anti-tank guns to bleed every kilometer of Soviet advance. The brigade's spearhead included 4 M4A2 Shermans, diesel variants sent under Lend-Lease. The crews liked them. The engines were reliable in cold. The radios worked. The turrets were smooth. But in Ukrainian mud, even a good tank could die in silence. This mission mattered because speed mattered. If the column slowed, German reserves from the west could counterattack. The Shermans were meant to move fast, support T-34s, and crush any Panzergrenadier screen before heavier German armor could arrive. One stalled tank could stall the entire road. Inside Sherman, White 23, was senior technician 2nd Class Ivan Sidorovich Makarov. He was not a hero by medals. He had no famous battles behind him. He had something more dangerous, experience with broken machines in bad places. Before the war, he had repaired tractors near Voronezh. In 1941 he had watched T-26 tanks fail in mud so thick they could not be pulled out. He had learned that mud did not stop engines, it stopped tracks. And once tracks stopped, engines only made the problem worse. Makarov was short, heavy-shouldered, with fingers permanently scarred from steel cable and cold iron. He spoke little. But when a vehicle failed, he moved fast. He feared mud more than shells. Shells ended things quickly. Mud killed slowly. On this morning, he rode in the rear of the Sherman column, perched on the engine deck of White 23. The rain had eased to a mist, but the ground was still breathing water. At 2:41, the lead T-34 bogged down crossing a shallow field. Engineers pulled it free with 2 tractors. The Shermans waited. At 3:02, White 23 entered the same field. At 3:05, its left track began to drag. The driver felt it first, resistance on the tillers, uneven pull. He compensated, feeding more power. The diesel engine responded obediently. But power was the wrong answer. Mud packed into the track links, into the idler wheel, into the teeth of the drive sprocket. Each rotation carried more clay. The heavier the track became, the deeper it sank. By 3:08, the Sherman was no longer rolling. It was plowing. The commander ordered halt. But the tank obeyed inertia, not voices. The left side sank to the belly plate. The right track spun uselessly, throwing mud like spray. The engine roared. The tank did not move. Makarov was off the deck before the turret stopped rocking. He dropped into mud up to his knees. He did not curse. He did not shout. He went straight to the left track. The problem was immediate and fatal: the track had not broken. It had not derailed. It had been swallowed. Mud had packed so tightly between the track and the sprocket that the teeth could no longer engage. Each turn only polished mud smoother. The Sherman could run forever and go nowhere. The commander demanded towing. The radio crackled with bad news: the T-34 ahead was still being pulled free. No spare vehicle could reach them in time. Then came the first German mortar rounds. Not close yet. But searching. Makarov knew the pattern. Germans did not fire blindly. They probed. Then they closed. He ordered the engine shut down. The driver hesitated. Engines meant hope. Silence meant death. But Makarov knew, spinning only buried the track deeper. He crawled under the left sponson, water seeping into his coat. He dug with his hands, then with a shovel, then with a pry bar. The mud behaved like wet cement. Every minute, the Sherman sank another centimeter. By 3:14, German machine gun fire began from the tree line. Not accurate, just testing. By 3:16, a flare went up. White light flooded the field. The Sherman was naked. The commander shouted for the gunner to fire smoke, but the turret had only one grenade loaded. They would need it later. Makarov looked at the track, at the sprocket, at the mud packed so tight it might as well have been welded. Normal methods would not work. Digging would take an hour. Towing was impossible. Driving was useless. Then he saw something that frightened him. The mud was not just thick. It was sticky. It clung. And because of that, it could be shaped. He remembered tractors near Voronezh, how farmers used boards, chains, even sacks to give wheels something to bite. A track did not need to be clean. It needed to grip. He shouted for canvas, rope, and the emergency cable. The crew stared. Canvas was for covering supplies. Cable was for towing. Makarov did not explain. He worked. He cut a length of canvas tarp, soaked it in diesel, and wrapped it tightly around two sections of the left track where the sprocket would engage. Over that, he wound steel cable, binding fabric to metal, creating artificial teeth where real ones were buried. If it failed, the cable could whip loose and cut him in half. If it worked, the track might bite just long enough to climb out. The first mortar landed 50 meters away. He tightened the last knot with shaking hands. "Start," he ordered. The engine coughed, then roared. The driver eased power, not full throttle. The right track spun. The left hesitated. Then the wrapped section met the sprocket. The cable bit. The canvas grabbed. The track climbed. For 1 second, the Sherman moved. Then the cable snapped. Steel lashed into the mud beside Makarov's head. The tank slid back into its hole. German mortars began falling in pairs. Makarov did not retreat. He only counted again. 60 seconds. He would try one more time, but this time, he would change one thing. He did not use cable the second time. Steel was strong, but too rigid. When it broke, it became a weapon. This time, Makarov tore long strips from the remaining canvas and from 2 spare ration sacks. He soaked them again in diesel and engine oil until they were heavy and slick. Then he forced them deep into the packed mud around the drive sprocket and along 3 links of the buried track. Not to clean it. To change its shape. He used a pry bar to wedge the fabric between metal and mud, forcing uneven bulges where smooth clay had been. Where the sprocket teeth could not reach steel, they might reach soaked cloth. The commander screamed at him to get back under armor. Tracers were snapping low now, stitching the field. A bullet tore through the canvas in his hands. Makarov finished anyway. He rolled clear, slammed his palm against the hull. "Slow power," he shouted. The diesel growled to life again. The driver fed and torqued gently, almost fearfully. The right track spun. The Sherman leaned. Then the left track moved. Not freely. Not smoothly. It lurched, like a man climbing out of a grave. The cloth compressed. Mud cracked. The sprocket teeth found resistance. The tank moved forward half a meter. Another half. The crew shouted. Makarov did not. He watched the track like a surgeon watching a pulse. The cloth tore. One strip vanished into the mud. But enough remained. The Sherman climbed another meter. Then another. Mortars walked closer. One exploded so near that clods of mud slammed into the hull like thrown stones. "More power," Makarov signaled. The driver increased throttle. The left track broke free of its hole with a wet tearing sound. Mud slid away from the belly plate. The tank lurched forward, then stabilized. White 23 was moving. Makarov ran alongside until he could no longer keep up. He dove onto the engine deck and pounded the turret roof. The commander ordered smoke. The grenade burst, pouring white clouds behind them as the Sherman crawled back toward firmer ground. German fire intensified, but now they were blind. At 3:24, White 23 reached the raised road embankment. The track still dragged, but it rolled. The trick had not repaired the tank. It had only bought movement. They withdrew behind the next hedgerow, where infantry from the 6th Guards formed a thin screen. Engineers rushed forward. Only then did Makarov allow himself to sit. His hands shook violently. His coat was soaked through. Diesel and mud covered his face so thick that no one could tell where blood had dried from a shallow cut near his ear. The commander clasped his shoulder, but said nothing. Behind them, German mortars fell on empty mud. The column resumed movement an hour later, but White 23 was sent to the rear for full cleaning and track service. The wrapped cloth had torn away completely after 3 more kilometers. The sprocket teeth were still clogged, but now the mud could be chipped out safely. That night, Makarov wrote a short note in his field booklet. "Deep mud stops tracks, not engines. When steel cannot bite, give it something else." He did not name what he had done. He did not claim invention. He only wrote what had happened. 2 weeks later, near Bila Tserkva, another Sherman bogged in black clay. The mechanic who reached it first had heard about Makarov's tank. He tried cloth. It worked long enough to save the crew. By December, in reports of the 1st Guards Tank Army, there appeared a strange phrase. Temporary traction achieved by foreign material packed into drive area. No officer claimed responsibility. No manual mentioned it. But in diaries and letters, mechanics wrote simply, "We made the track bite mud with cloth." Some historians later dismissed it as exaggeration. Others said it was impossible, that fabric would tear instantly. But in November 1943, in a field south of Fastiv, one Sherman moved when it should have died. And one mechanic lived because he understood one simple truth. A tank does not need perfection. It only needs 1 more meter. The war moved on. The mud froze. The memory did not. And somewhere in an archive, a line remains. White 23 recovered under fire by improvised traction method. Time to movement, approximately 60 seconds. No medal followed. No photograph survived. Only the fact that a dead tank breathed once more, because someone made steel bite cloth. Years later, when the archives of the 1st Guards Tank Army were opened in fragments, clerks found the entry about White 23 filed among routine maintenance reports. No decoration. No witness statements. No citation for bravery. Just one line written in blue pencil. Vehicle freed from mud under fire by non-standard traction method. The officers who signed the page were already dead by 1945. The mechanic's name was misspelled in one copy and missing entirely in another. In some versions, White 23 was recorded as AT-34 by mistake. In others, the date was shifted by 2 days. Historians later argued over whether such a trick could even work. Some said fabric would tear instantly. Some said mud would swallow anything soft. Some said it was a story invented by tired men trying to give meaning to fear. But mechanics who served in Ukraine and Poland told similar things, in different words. One wrote in 1944 near Lutsk. We packed straw, coats, even dead grass into the track teeth. Sometimes it held. Sometimes it did not. But sometimes was enough. Another near Lviv noted. Cloth makes noise when it tears. But before it tears, it moves you. There is no photograph of Makarov at Fastiv. But there is a photograph taken in January 1944 of a Sherman with rags frozen into its track, somewhere near Zhytomyr. No caption explains why. Some say that is White 23. Some say it is not. The truth is smaller than legend. A man saw a problem. He used what was near. He bought 60 seconds of life. That is all war ever allows. After the war, Makarov returned to tractors. He never wrote memoirs. In 1962, he told a local journalist only this. Machines do not care about orders. They care about physics. When he died, no one thought to link his name to a Sherman in Ukraine. But somewhere in the mud south of Fastiv, long since plowed into quiet fields, a tank once climbed out of its grave because steel found something, anything, to bite. And for 1 minute, that was enough. Thank you for listening to a story where survival did not come from firepower, but from hands, mud, and a single idea under fire.